Hello and welcome to part 4 of the Java course. So in this tutorial we will keep learning more Java related features, and this time we will start with the break feature. Okay, so we already know how to break in a switch statement, but now we can also break inside a loop, for example a while loop. So if we create a while loop, so we have to create an external variable. In this case, we will call it loop count, set it to 0. And inside this while loop, I will, for example, say while loop count is less than 10. Okay, and I will here update loop count variable, saying loop count plus plus. Okay, and here what I'll do is I will, for example, print the loop count. To print, we use system dot out dot print ln, and we will print loop count, right? So, but now how can we use the break statement? For example, we can use it in the following way. Maybe we don't want to end the loop. We want to check for whatever reason if the loop count is equal to 5 and we want to stop the loop. So we want to go outside the loop. Okay, so kind of exit the loop before it has been finished, right? So to exit we just call break. Okay, so this means when the loop count equals 5, it will break the while loop, so it will continue here. So the break will continue here, right? So let's now run. Let me see. Let's compile the code and let's run the code. I say Java code. Okay, and as you can see, it doesn't print on to 10, but only till reaches 5, right? So this is why what the break statement is doing right there, right? So that's break, but we also have the continue statement. Actually, it can continue the iteration, kind of force the next iteration. To see this, to figure this out better, we will put this if check before we print out the system, right? And what we will do here, instead of saying break, we will say continue. Okay, so when loop count is equal to 5, we will continue. That means that it will skip this code and will go to the next instruction, right? So let's see if we can do this, right? So let me check. We're compiling it, we're running it, and as you can see, it goes from 0 to 4, right? But the problem here is that it stops there because we are not updating this right here. So before doing continue, what we will do is will be loop count plus plus, and then we will say continue, right? Okay, so now we will exit the program by pressing Ctrl C, and we will compile it again and run it again. And as you can see, what it does, it prints every number, but it doesn't print the number 5, because when it reaches the 5 state, we're continuing to the next one, which is 6. So we skip the 5, okay, and we go into the 6th one. So that's how continue works. So we have learned how break and continue works, right? Now let's learn a bit about arrays, right? So let me delete this right here and continue with arrays. So an array is a data type that stores multiple objects of the same type. For example, if I want to create a string array, I will put a string followed by square brackets, and maybe I want to define colors, right? So if I want to define colors, I open a bracket and I can define it as, for example, red, green, okay, green, what else? Orange and black, for example, right? So this is how, and of course end it with a semicolon. So this is how we define an array. So the colors variable stores 4 items right here. And if we want to access one item of the array, we use what is called an index. So in computer science, we start counting from 0. So red would be at the index 0, green would be at the index 1, orange would be at the index 2, and black will be at index 3, right? So let's see if we can print this. So we're going to say system dot out dot println, and what we will do is we want to print colors at index 0, right? So if I print colors at index 0 and I compile the code and I run it, you can see that red is printed to the screen, right? If I go here and if I go to index 1, which is the second item, green will be printed, right? So we compile it, we run it, and as you can see, green is now printed. So this is basically how we can create strings. Instead of a string array, right? We can also, if we don't want to create an array of strings, we can create an array of integers too. So we're going to say int array, and we will define it as ages, for example, right? And we will define it again. So maybe one person has 10 years, another has 80 years, another 39, another 48, and so on. So the same things, if we want to print this again, we will say system.out.println, and we will pass, in this case, ages at 0, which will be 10, because 10 is the element 0, right? The first element. So if we go and compile the code, and then we run it, as you can see, the 10 element is printed to the screen. So you can have really any kind of object type on an array, right? So we can also maybe change an element inside an array, right? So to change an element inside an array, we can do the following. For example, we want to change the first element in ages. So we're going to say ages at 0, we will set it to 12. Okay, so instead of 10, I am writing 12 to the 0th element of the array, right? So if I print it, so let me compile it and run, 12 will be printed instead of 10, because now it doesn't have the 10 value, but it has the 12 value, right? So this is basically how can we do this. And we can also print the array length by calling, for example, ages.length, which will return the amount of items we have. In this case, we have 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if we print this, so let's check if this works. So let me compile. And here we have, it says cannot find symbol, and it says variable length. Oh, okay. So this means that this length is variable. To have a fixed length, we have to define it here, for example, int, and say 4, right? And we have 4 items, right? So I think that would be the fix right here. Okay, let's see if that's the case. Okay. So I don't think that will fix it. So let me see right here. So maybe this length thing says length cannot be resolved or is not a field, which is kind of strange. Maybe because this is not final, maybe? I don't really know. So this is kind of strange to me. because it should print the length of the array. Maybe it doesn't work with integers array, so let's try it with the colors, right? So colors dot length. Okay. Oops, I'm writing length wrong. Colors dot length, right? So I think it was a typo actually. Oh, it says 4. So I think I have a typo here. So let's go and say ages dot length. And yeah, it definitely was a typo. So I, instead of ending with th, I ended with ht, which was my error, right? So that was a quick to fix error. So as you can see, in both cases we have 4 elements. So here we have 4 and here we have 4. So this is how we can access an array in Java. Now, what if we want to change all the elements of the array? Or maybe we want to print all of the elements in colors, right? So we will use a loop that will enable us to do that. So for example, the simplest loop, or the more convenient in this case, it will be the for loop. We're gonna say for, and I'll say int I equals 0, I less than colors dot length. Okay, I less than colors dot length. Okay, is this correct? Let me check. Length, apparently it is, and we will say I plus plus. Okay, and inside this for loop we will print the colors, right? So this basically means print the colors, all the colors, right? But here, instead of using the index 1, we will use the index I, because we will be increasing the index y, and it will print 0th element, then the 1th, the second, the third, and so on. And if we compile and run, you can see how it prints red, green, orange, black. So this is how we can access array elements using a for loop, right? So this is basically how arrays work, which are very, very useful. We can have byte arrays and so on. So now what we will learn will be exceptions. So an exception means that when an error occurs, we have an error message, right? So that event in which the programming language kind of throws an error message is known as an exception, right? So let's try to force an exception and to generate one. Okay, so let me delete this, and inside the main method I'll type the following. For example, I want to create a Boolean array, right? It can be any kind of array maybe. So Boolean array, and I will call it my Boolean array, right? And I will set this to brackets. I'll set it to true, then false, and then true, right? So there is my Boolean array, right? Which has 3 elements, by the way. Well, the first one is true, the second one is false, and the third one is true. So what happens if I want to print an element that doesn't exist? So I say system.out.println, okay, and I'll print the thing at my Boolean array, but at element 5, for example, which we don't have a 5, right? We only have at most 3 elements, right? So when I will try to run this now, okay? So I will compile this, and now I will run it, and as you can see, we have exception in thread main, okay? Java lang array index out of bounds exception. Index 5 out of bounds for length 3. So this means you're trying to access element 5 on an array that only has 3 elements. So this is what we refer to as an exception. Okay, the event that throws an error, right? Now, when an error occurs, maybe we don't want this to be thrown, but we want to catch it. So to do that, we will do the following. So we will surround this code with a try and catch blocks, right? So we will do the following and manage an exception, right? So we're going to say try, and we will open a try, and when we finish this, we'll say catch. We'll open parentheses out. Here we will write exception and the name of exception. In this case, I will call X maybe. Okay. So I'll put these 2 lines inside the try block, which basically means try to do this. And if it's not possible for some reason, catch an exception, right? And when we catch an exception, we want to tell the system that we have catched the exception. So you can say system.out that print ln, and here we're gonna say like something went wrong, right? So we want to tell that something went wrong, right? So we have an exception. Okay, so if we run this, as you can see, it prints something went wrong. Okay, so this is how we catch and handle an exception, right? Okay. So we are also able to execute some code after we catch an exception, right? So to do that, we use the finally feature. So after catch, we type finally, we open brackets, and what we'll do here will be print something. So we will system.out.println, and we will print something like this is the finally block, right? In your real world application, you maybe want to do some clever stuff here, some stuff that you actually need to do, but since we're just testing, we're just displaying this is the finally block. So if we compile the program and then run, here we can say that this is the finally block. So this will be executed regardless if the session was catched or not, okay, if the exception occurred or not, right? Otherwise, the catch will be only executed when the exception occurred, right? So this is basically how exceptions work in Java. So they are kind of very useful in real world because we can have null pointer exception, which means we're trying to access an element that is null or hasn't been initialized or has been freed from memory and so on, right? So this is basically how we can catch an exception, right? So now let's try to learn a bit about methods, okay? So maybe we want to create a method with parameters in that we want to access them. For example, if I create a method that I'll call void my method, okay, and we open parentheses, and inside here what we write here will be called parameters. It can be any data type you want, for example an integer, and for example it would be a number. Okay, if we open this, we can also have more than one parameter. We can have a string right here, so I will call it my string. Okay, so when we pass and when we call that method, so from the main method I will say my method, okay, and it will tell me that I cannot, oh, let me see, my method, and I will pass 0 as the first one because the first one is an int. So the data type I've passed in the same, I have to pass it in the same order that I have defined up here. And the second one is a string, so I have to pass in a string, like hello, right? So that's how we define my method. Now, if we try to compile this, what will happen is that it says Java, and here we have the line in which the error is located. It says error, non-static method, my method cannot be referenced from a static context. So what does this mean? It means that if you are inside a static method, as in this case, we must call also static methods only. So we're gonna make this method static, and now if we compile it, it will actually work, right? So that's basically how we have to do that. So that's basically about methods. We can pass not only these, we maybe want to pass a string array or an integer array, or maybe we have even custom objects we created, right? Like a dog, right? We can even pass a dog, like a dog class, right? So that's basically how we pass methods between function calls, okay? Okay, so if we go back to the dog class and we kind of rethink about it, now that we know a bit more about how classes works, a bit more how parameters work, now we have these two constructor methods, which means that they build the object, right? That's why they are called constructors. Okay, so these constructor methods are called depending on which parameters you pass, as I explained in one of the previous videos. So this Java language is very interconnected, so we have to go back and forth between concepts to actually understand what we're talking about, right? Okay, so here if I call dog without any parameter, it will create a dog, but without any parameter. But here, when I call it with a name, I want to set the name of the dog, right? So I want to set the name of the dog, but we don't have a name field, so we will create a name field. So you can say string name, okay? And as I told you previously, when I call the dog thing, we want to set the name. To access the name that is outside these methods, so we want to access this name right here instead of this one right here, we use actually the word this. So you can say this that name. What I'm telling it is access the name right here, and I'll set this to name. Okay, so let's try to check if that even works. So we will go and delete this method, and what I will do is I will call the dog class. So you can say dog, my dog. Okay, now set it to new dog, and I will pass a parameter because I want this to be created with a name. I'll pass max again, like a name. Okay. Okay, so max 1, for example. So if we try to compile this and run it, we can see how it works. And now we're gonna print out this, gonna say system dot out dot print ln. We'll set this to print the dog name. So I'll say my dog dot name. Okay, so if we do this, we're gonna go ahead and it will print max 1. So that's how we can do that, but that's basically the modifier that enables us to do that, okay? But what if we don't want the outside world to access this? Okay, so maybe we want to call this make it a private value. So if I make it a private value, when I compile it, it will says Java at line 6, it will says error, name has private access in dog, okay? Which means that the name string right here can only be accessed from inside the dog method. Okay? So we cannot access from outside it. But even when we have this, we can get the dog name. How? Well, in the following way, we can create a public string get name, okay? And this will return the name of the dog. So I'm gonna say return name. And this can actually access name because this method is located inside the class. So I cannot do dog.name, but what I can do my dog.get name, okay? So I can actually do that, right? So if I compile this and run it, now we can access max1 even though name is a private modifier, but we are using a public method that returns a private to this class object, which is the dog name, right? So this is how we basically use this. So sometimes we see that methods are static, like the main method, right? So what does it mean, okay? Well, it can mean that the method can be accessed without creating an object of the class. Okay? So how can we explain this better? Okay, let's do an example, right? And let's create a static and a non-static method inside the dog class. So we already have some non-static methods, right? Like the get name or get age or whatever, right? But what if we want to create a static method? For example, a static void. I'll call it my static method, right? If I open this method, okay, and I will do the following, right? I will say system dot out dot println, and I'll print this is my static method, right? So basically I'm trying to illustrate the difference between static and public, for example, right? So we have here a public one and static method as I am selecting them, right? But if I call them from main, for example, or even from another method from the constructor, maybe right here, I can call both methods from here. And what this means is that let me see. So we can call the static method without creating a class. You know, we can call the static method without creating a class. Whereas if we call the public method, we cannot call the public method without creating a class. So let me illustrate this even better, right? So inside when we create this dog, I will call my static method, right? I will just call my static method when I create the dog, right? Okay, so if I call it, yes, I'm actually calling it. So let's run it. Let's compile and run. It says this is my static method, which worked, right? But what if I want to call my public method, like for example, get age, right? So if I call get age, okay, I compile this, oops, and I run it, then, okay, let me see what happens here. So in the public method, I will try to call this public method right here. So let me check. So the problem is that here we are already creating the new class, okay? So let's try to do the same but in the main method, right? So let's, outside the main method, I will create a public method. So say public void, I will call it my public method, right? Okay, I will open brackets on here and I'll say system dot out. Okay, we're calling this, of course, from inside the main method, so I call it my public method. I'm gonna say system dot out dot println. Okay, and here I'll say I am public method, right? So this is our public method right here. And now inside the main function right here, which is a static method, and if we want to call a public method, like saying my public method, right? If we want to do this, and if we compile this, it will give us an error code that would say non-static method. But what I want to illustrate here that is that we can we need to create a class before calling a static method, right? So we need to access an object of the class, right? Okay, so when we try to compile this, it will give a compile error, right? Whereas if I make this method static, I don't need to create a new class. I don't need to call a new class, right? So I can just call my public method and it will work right away. Oops, let me see. So it will compile and then it will work, right? And it will say I am a public method. But how can I call a public method? How can I do this? Well, I can still do this creating an object. So how can we do this? So if I call it right away, it won't work as you saw. But I can create a new class. It'll say, for example, Java code. Okay, Java code, and I'll call it my class. And I will set this to new Java code. So I'm creating a new class. So let me call this way. Okay, so we have new Java code, and right here I can go and say my class dot my public method, and now I can actually call the public method from inside the class. So if you want to call a public method, you want to create a new class, whereas if you want to call a static method, we don't need to create a new class. So this is kind of a very interesting concept, kind of new if you haven't used Java previously, but very important. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I see you in the next one. Bye.